How powerful is Cox Fiber? Powerful enough to keep fans across the country in the action on the biggest game days of the year. Whether you're one of 65,000 fans at Allegiant Stadium or you're streaming the game at home with Cox Fiber from the company with America's fastest download speeds. Whenever it matters most, Cox keeps you connected. Limited availability in select areas. Speeds vary and are not guaranteed. Cox terms and other restrictions may apply. Analysis by Ookla of Speed Test Intelligence data. Fixed median download speeds. US Q3 2023.
All right. I am happy to be joined. We are happy to be joined by Myron Schuckman, who we're going to tell his story as we go through the segment. Myron, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you. You're on with myself and my son, Jeff, and my other son, Jason.
Awesome.
So you were part of the Notre Dame basketball team that in 1974 in South Bend on a Saturday afternoon hosted UCLA, which was riding an 88-game winning streak at the time, had the great Bill Walton on that team along with Keith Wilkes and others, and you pulled off that upset in one of the most legendary college basketball games of all time. You're from McCracken, Kansas, up in northwestern part of the state, a very tiny school. First of all,
Right.
Tell us about your journey from McCracken to get to Notre Dame.
Well, that's always the question that comes up. I'm not for sure how it happened because, McCracken is a 1A school. We had 50 kids in school, about 250 in town, southwest of Hayes. And, we were fortunate enough to have some really good teams back there with a great coach named Glenn Connor. And so we took second in state in 1971, and then we won state in 72. And, I guess through all that, back in the 70s, there's publications and stuff that comes out. And somewhere through all of that, Notre Dame got a hold of me. And I'll kind of preface saying that between my sophomore and junior year, and then between my junior senior year, I had a chance to attend Jayhawk basketball camp with Ted Owens, and through that time frame, got to be good friends with Ted and with Bob Frederick and all, and was recruited by them. And so getting the call from Notre Dame was a rather interesting one. And they invited me to come see the campus in late October, and I'll just tell a quick story here. And it was late October, and we were having a little bit of a sleet storm out in western Kansas, and I was driving over to Hayes to go on the plane. I stopped, and I just thought to myself, I really don't need to go because I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go to KU. But I went anyway and showed up, and then after I came back from Notre Dame, it was just like, well, I think I know where I'm going. So that's kind of the journey overall, pretty quick.
So this win over UCLA happened 50 years ago today. Is this a date that's ingrained in you? Do you reflect on this day? What particular memories kind of come back to you when you're thinking about that day?
For me, some of the key memories were, I'll say that some of that led up to the game. One was the fact that, as we came in, we were number 2. UCLA was rated number 1. We were both undefeated. And I would say from the beginning of December, now here again, this game is January 19th, Digger had already in his mind, he knew what he wanted to do in that game. And so during practices, as we're preparing for other teams we're playing, he would always leave time to run UCLA plays. So we were prepping to play UCLA, 6 weeks before we even got there. And instilling in our minds, all of us, that, these guys can be beat. And even to the extent that I think it was the practice before the game, he brought in ladders in the team practice cutting down the net so we could visualize actually doing that. So those were a couple of events leading into it. And then the day of the game was just never been in a stadium like that. The electricity, the excitement going on, and the buzz. And it was, the whole game was electric. And then, getting up to the end of it where John Shoemate comes down with the final rebound, and, the rest is history.
Well, and I'm always interested on the fact, you said you guys were basically prepping for 2 months before this game because you knew this was the one. So how was the feeling after? And tell me a story about some of the parties you went to after that game.
wait a minute, this is Notre Dame. It's a Catholic university.
Oh, that's right. Nothing happened. You guys went to bed, right?
Well, I'll tell you what. There were probably a lot of parties, and I was not involved with any of them. No, I'm sure
There
I
you
just
go.
went back to the dorm with our classmates because Notre Dame did not have athletic dorms, so we were just with all the other students. And so I went back there, and I was lucky enough to have my high school sweetheart with me, who's now sitting next to me in the car because we've been married 48 years. So,
Wow.
we all went back, and I suppose that was the celebration and the party was just hanging out with all the guys and everything. So I wish I could give you some real good party stories. I'm sure there are quite a few that went on, but I wasn't participating in any of them.
That's okay. She's sitting beside you. We'll talk later.
Okay.
As we hear her laugh. Myron Schuckman is our guest. Myron?
Yep.
Tell us, how long did you work at Coke here in Wichita, Coke Industries?
38 years.
Wow.
Yep.
Amazing.
Retired about three and a half years ago.
You were a freshman on that particular team. You didn't get in that game. But
No,
from what I
I was a
understand, you were a vital part of the practices leading up to that game because in some cases, I'm told, need you to verify,
Hello?
you kind of played the Bill Walton role in the practices leading up to that
Right.
game. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. Actually, I was a sophomore that year.
Okay.
I was a year ahead of Adrian Dantley. Dantley was a freshman that year. So, as a matter of fact, you're right. I did get the opportunity to play Bill Walton, so Shoemate had to guard me. And so Digger brought out a red curly wig to put on to simulate guarding Bill Walton.
Wow.
I mean, let's face it, Digger did through went through everything he could to pull out all the stops to make it as realistic as possible. And, it was kind of interesting because the team, I think we knew UCLA's plays better than we probably knew our own plays because we were practicing it every day. And, so that was part of it. And I must say, those were some really intense practices, but in a really good way. I mean, we were very focused on what we needed to get done.
It was an incredible box score. I'm looking at it right now. You guys, you had Brokaw and Shoemate both play 40 minutes in that game and combined for 49 of your team's 71 points. And Walton also played all 40 minutes. He had 24 points, but didn't go to the foul stripe, did not shoot a free throw in that game. How do you not foul Bill Walton?
Well, I don't know. Maybe the rosaries that were being prayed that day in the stadium must have been working or something. I don't know. That would be unusual for Walton not to go to the free throw line. So I can't really tell you. I don't know.
Yeah, that's wild. So you've been talking about your coach, Digger Phelps, and, for guys, my generation, we remember most as an analyst, a TV guy. You've told some funny anecdotes. Yeah, I think that's the word about him. What was he like as a coach overall? What was special about him?
My wife is laughing again. Well, let's just say this first of all. I had never met anybody like Digger. I had a high school coach that was about as calm as you could get. He never yelled in practice or at a game or anything. I mean, he was there to coach you. Whereas Digger, I would say you never really knew who you had coming to practice. Well, you kind of did. You knew if you lost the game, you were going to have somebody like Bobby Knight coming in, and it was going to be just a terrible practice. And then on the other hand, Digger can just be the nicest guy. And he was just a really pleasant guy, wonderful personality. No, I won't go with that story. No, but
Tell it.
Tell it. Okay. So I grew up on a farm, 10 miles out of McCracken, and so Digger had come out. I don't know how many times he'd been out both to watch and then just in the general recruiting me, and I had a pet pig named George. It was a boar, and anyway, he came into school one day and saw me, and it was about 11 o'clock. We were in shop class, and he came over and he said, "Oh, by the way, your dad just sold George this morning," and I didn't know that. And so he over the years he would kind of come back and keep talking about my pet pig. He was a city boy and all that, so I guess it was unusual for him. But 10 years ago, we got together for a reunion back up at Notre Dame, and his daughters were there. And so now his daughters were now probably 45 to 47 years old, and we were sitting and chatting, and I just made a comment about Digger's memory. And I said, "Tell you what, go over there and ask your dad what the name of my pet pig was." And she comes back over and she said, "Is it George?" And so, so that's kind of the dynamic that Digger had. He just had an unbelievable memory, remembered people, but the personality was, off the charts. Just in, what's that? 2 years ago. Yeah. Oh, and that's why my wife just reminded me, we did see Digger 2 years ago. We went up for a football and a basketball game and had a chance to visit with him a little bit too that night. So quite a personality. What you saw on TV is, I would say, was very, very much Digger. Yeah.
Myron Schuckman is our guest, part of the Notre Dame team that 50 years ago today ended UCLA's 50-game winning streak in South Bend in one of the classic games of all time. So I know you were caught up in Notre Dame winning that game. What do you remember about the reactions of the UCLA players and even Coach John Wooden about losing that game? Because that was an incredible dynasty they were in. They obviously valued that winning streak. Did you happen to glance over at any of those folks?
No.
No, I don't blame you.
I did not. Because afterwards, you're storming the floor, and the last thing you were doing was looking over at the team or John Wooden. But one thing that does stand out is that I remember watching an ESPN special on Walton some years ago, and obviously this game came up, and his comment was, that game was the worst day of his life.
Wow.
And I thought, well, that's just too bad. But,
It had to be interesting to be in the same place and in the same game with John Wooden. What was your reaction? What are your thoughts on him?
Well, just with John Wooden, I grew up watching UCLA, and let's face it, out in western Kansas back then, you get two TV stations, and every once in a while you'd get a UCLA game on or a KU game or something. But so, UCLA was a team that we probably all followed back at that time. And I don't know if you remember, if you're old enough to remember, like the Houston UCLA game in around 64, 65 with Lou Alcindor.
I'm old enough to remember all of that. Trust me.
Things like that were just outstanding. So, Wooden was just the epitome of a coach. Everything you watched and you read, and the way and the style that he coached and everything was you kind of like what a coach should be. You never really saw him get red in the face or too much from, being upset or things like that. But here again, he doesn't have too much to be upset about when you have teams with Alcindor and Walton and things like people like that on it. And, you're coming off of 7 consecutive NCAA championships. And so, the man's, he's just, what do you say about him? He's just a legend.
Well, Myron, thank you for taking some time to talk with us today. I was thrilled when my friend and yours, Jeff Bolig, pointed this out and said, why don't you get Myron on the show? So I made that happen, fortunately. We were able to connect, and we appreciate you coming on to reminisce.
Well, it's my pleasure. I wish I could share a whole lot more better stories from the standpoint of they were fresh in my mind. But, after 50 years, don't ask me what I had for lunch yesterday. But, one good thing did happen last night. I happened to go out and I read an article from the South Bend Tribune, and it happened to be about, the game 50 years ago, and they had a segment in there of the last 3.5 minutes of the game where we were down by 11 points, 3.5 minutes, and, UCLA did not score in those 3.5 minutes, and then we came back and pulled off the upset. So that was great to just relive those 3.5 minutes again.
It was amazing. Thank you, Myron.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks for giving me a chance to talk to you.
How How powerful is Cox Internet? Powerful enough to keep fans across the country in the action on the biggest game days of the year. Whether you're one of 65,000 fans at Allegiant Stadium or you're streaming the game at home with America's fastest download speeds powered by fiber. Whenever it matters most, Cox keeps you connected. Cox Internet is connected to the premises via coaxial connection. Speeds vary and are not guaranteed. Cox terms and other restrictions may apply. Analysis by Ookla of speed test intelligence data. Fixed median download speeds. US Q3 2023.